All right, guys, now it's time to take this out on the road and see what it's like to drive. All right, guys, behind the wheel of the Cybertruck now. To go ahead and put it into drive, you put your foot on the brake and swipe forward, just like the Plaid. And then to put it into reverse, you swipe backwards. Now we've got a nice rear view camera, because if you look in the rear view mirror, you can't actually see anything when that tonneau cover is closed. This actually runs at all times, apparently. We'll see that in a second. If you swipe forward, we have, for the first time ever in a Tesla, a front camera, which is super nice both for parking and because if you're off-roading and you're up at an angle, you're not going to be able to see over the front of the vehicle. So that's super nice as an off-roading feature. Now, I'm very curious to see what this steer-by-wire setup is like. It's the first time ever in a production vehicle. So let's see what that's like. I just maneuvered it a little bit around this parking lot, and even the slightest amount of inputs in the steering result in a very large amount of turning. So one of the craziest parts about the Cybertruck isn't the fact that it looks like a DeLorean from the future combined with a truck. It's the fact that it has the first ever production steer-by-wire setup. Apparently, they use steer-by-wire in airplanes and have for decades, but this is the first time in a production automobile. And the result is pretty fascinating, actually. We've got rear axle steering that can turn up to 10 degrees in the opposite direction of the front wheels. So it actually is very maneuverable around parking lots. I'm actually gonna pull in before we really get out on the road into this parking lot area here to show you how crazy the steer-by-wire setup is. We now have actual buttons on the steering wheel itself. Before it was these little haptic feedback controls that I got used to, but I could see why certain people weren't a fan of them. But I'm just giving it the smallest little inputs right here, and it turns the vehicle so quickly. I mean, it feels like it changes directions faster than a supercar because you don't have to give it any input whatsoever in the steering in order to turn left and right. I imagine it takes a little bit to get used to, but honestly, I kind of like it from the get-go. It's a very, very interesting sensation. Another really good thing that they did with the steering wheel is that we finally have an actual horn on the steering wheel instead of these little buttons where you mash it with your hand and you hope that in time, in case of an emergency, you actually hit the horn. It's nice that we actually have a production horn. Now, in the concept truck, they had this crazy kind of marble shelf in front of you. I imagine that would be horrible for glare. It also just looked kind of odd. I actually really like the layout of this front dash. The windshield is absolutely enormous. As I mentioned, it's the largest piece of glass, largest windshield ever to be put in a car. There's a lot of records with this Cybertruck. Same with that windshield wiper. Interestingly, the Cyber Beast comes with an Alcantara dash, and we were looking at the Cyber Beast down there compared to the all-wheel drive dual motor one, and I actually kind of like the look of this dash more than the Alcantara for some reason. The quality of the Alcantara looked a little bit iffy, although I believe that's VIN number 5, so maybe it's a car that's super early in the build cycle and it'll get better over time. It also had some Alcantara bits on the steering wheel, whereas I much prefer the leather on this Squircle than having those little bits of Alcantara. But man, look at this. Look at all of these Cybertrucks down there. There was actually the most ever in the world next to each other. I believe it was 6 or 7 of them at one meet, which is a pretty cool thing. Now you can see that little mini feed right there behind us. You can see, because, well, you can't see anything in that rear view mirror. The amount of attention that you get in the Cybertruck is pretty much unlike anything else I've ever driven. The only thing that came close is when I drove a Bugatti Chiron in the middle of Miami. I pulled it over at a gas station and it was pretty darn chaotic. I mean, you pretty much would want to fill up at home if you had a car like that, because you got to be friendly and show off the car and let people see it. Otherwise, people are going to think you're just a total jerk in your expensive car. But at the same time, if you have things to do and you're in a rush, it can be pretty crazy. This was wild. Filming it for just a brief period of time, the amount of people that pulled over to take pictures and look at it because they had never seen one before was pretty wild. But to be expected, because there haven't been that many produced yet of the Cybertruck. Eventually, with over 2 million orders, it's going to be pretty hilarious to see potentially 2 million, let's say only half take delivery, 1 million Cybertrucks on the road. Can you imagine just seeing, I mean, even those 7 at the same time on the highway next to each other is an absolutely ridiculous feat. We're gonna go ahead and turn in here. Show off that turning radius again. I mean, it has a very impressive turning circle. That's actually ridiculous for a truck. And it's very easy to drive. Nice Nice Gallardo right there. Good visibility. Anyone could drive this thing. And then when you step on it, even the dual motor 600 horsepower one, 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds, it actually is pretty quick. Obviously, it's not Tesla Plaid levels of speed, but this is an absolutely enormous truck. The crazy part is it weighs a good 2,500 pounds less than something like a Hummer EV. So despite the fact that it's big, it slows down a lot faster and it accelerates faster in beast form than a Hummer EV by a significant margin. And it comes in a little less expensive than a Hummer EV. I think if you're gonna compare the two, there's a no-brainer. This is definitely the car that I would go for. I'm impressed with the Cybertruck. I ordered one 4 years ago. I'm hoping that eventually it comes soon because I think this is one of the ultimate daily drivers.